Hey, Angela. How are you?
Hi guys, how are you?
Hi, Michael. Yeah, it's exciting to meet you.
Oh, right back at you.
Michael, a St. Ed's grad, my cousin Anthony Benedictine, and then, of course, Anthony and Angela. So their dad and I are first cousins. This whole theme for the year has all been about lawyers and the community of 4,500 lawyers being fit to practice mentally, physically, eating right, sleeping, being able to pause in times of stress. And so this month in November, we're talking about food and healthy eating and family. So first, Chef Michael Symon. He is a Cleveland food legend. He's an internationally acclaimed chef and author. And of course, a graduate of my alma mater as well as his St. Edward High School. So go Eagles. His newest book is called simply Symon Suppers. And Michael, welcome to Fit to Practice. So what's happening today in New York? And thank you for joining us.
All is good. Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. Everything's good. It's actually a relatively warm day here in New York. A little overcast, but no complaints. It's a nice Long Island day.
You guys missed our first snowfall already, just about a week ago, where we had some accumulation here in Cleveland.
I missed it by one day. I was home and I was in Cleveland for for a good stint, and then I came back out to Long Island. My dad called me the next day. He's like, "Your timing was perfect as usual. It is snowing today." So I'm like, "Oh, perfect."
And it was a typical Cleveland drive-in to downtown. Nobody remembers how to drive during snow. So my cousin Anthony Russo is with us. He's one half of the famous Russo brothers. My cousin Joe was unable to be with us, but Russo brothers, both Anthony and Joe, directors of the Avengers, blockbusters, among many other projects that they've shot here in Cleveland as well as around the world. His sister Angela is the chief creative officer for their company AGBO. And so both of them, I'm so wonderfully happy that the two of you can join me in such busy days. So how's that weather out there in now the early afternoon of Hollywood?
No early snow here
No.
or ever. Yeah. That's the funny thing. We have a completely, being based out here now for a while, we have a completely different reaction to reports to snow in general. It's never really a threat. It's always a thrill. So
no, we really miss it. And it's funny that you say nobody in Cleveland knows how to drive in the snow, because our memory of it out here is the people are masters of inclement weather. When it rains here, nobody knows how to drive. And so you kind of like laugh at yourself being from Ohio, because you're like, this could be a blizzard. And like if you do fly, there's a sprinkle here and suddenly nobody knows how to drive on the highway.
Yeah. Michael, why don't you have your latest book. It's called Simply Symon Suppers. I've had a chance to peruse and read some of it as well. Your book is about complete dinners, and some of it during your book and the writings is what you call, or we call, comfort food. You've had previous books that were titled Fix It with Food. And so really this fit to practice that I'm talking about here for the lawyers in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, how do you create comfort food that is also healthy?
Well, this is my 8th cookbook, and I've been a chef now, gosh, for over 35 years. And as I was getting older, in my mid 20s, I found out that I had discoid lupus and RA, like in my mid 20s. But in your 20s, you're kind of bulletproof. And so I just kind of ignored it and went through life, and, some aches and pains, but nothing crazy. I just thought they were old wrestling injuries from St. Ed's. And then as I started getting older, the aches started to get a little bit more severe, and the hands would cramp a little bit more. And I really didn't want to go on, I'm one of the lucky ones that has a family of people that are relatively fit that all have high cholesterol. So I already was on something for cholesterol, not a lot, but, something to kind of chill my cholesterol. I just didn't want to take another med. And I'm like, I'm I'm not 100% certain, but I'm relatively certain that, cholesterol for me was hard to control with diet because it was hereditary. And some of this was hereditary, but I wanted to see if I could control it with diet first. So I started, I kind of just started playing around with what I know about food and eliminating, eliminated everything to start. Like, no meat, no sugar, no dairy, no flour, no, like I have a little place in LA in Venice Beach. I was living in Cleveland in New York and eating like someone from LA. So I was like, I'm like, this is how I feel like I'm in Los Angeles. All I'm eating are greens. I'm so angry. So
That's a
I
good
just kind of eliminated everything and then started adding things in a little bit at a time to see what my triggers were. And for me, my triggers were dairy and sugar. So once I figured that out, then I'm a believer that healthy is different for everybody. I hate the word diet. I hate the word I hate when people try to do like this one size fits all style of eating or one size fits all style of exercise or it doesn't work. Different people react differently to different things. And so when I think of healthy food, I think of eating the foods that react best with you or for you, finding the products that don't have all the junk in them. Like, for instance, if I eat just plain old regular flour, because 95% of the flour in America has been bromated and bleached and enriched, I have a reaction from the flour. If I buy flour that hasn't been bromated, bleached, and enriched like it is in everywhere else in the world other than the United States, I have no aches and pains. So if I white refined sugar, pain. If I have honey, no pain. So it's like finding what works for me, which could be different than the person next to me. So that's how I define healthy. And then, but ultimately I'm a chef. So, pardon my French, but if food tastes like shit, I don't want to eat it. So the food has to taste great first. And then I have to figure out how to make it work for me. And that's kind of what the books are all about. Simply Symon Suppers is, I too am, I grew up Greek and Sicilian. So, every Sunday at my house, we had Sunday suppers. And, like most Italian American families, it was in my house, it was homemade cavatelli, sauce, garlic bread, big chopped, like chopped Greek salad. It was like a little bit of an Italian Greek mashup and like dolmades and a couple other things. And that happened every Sunday with family and people near and dear to us. And so the Simply Symon Suppers book is basically, 52 weeks of meals that aren't the exact one I ate every day as a kid, but are based on basically my childhood till now.
Nice.
And we mark what doesn't have gluten or sugar or dairy or things like that. So it's a little bit of a continuation from the two books that were previous to it. But this is more of a get around your table with friends and family and eat.
So Angela and Anthony, what was the importance of food for you? I mean, we grew up, just as Michael said, with that Sunday meal or the families getting together. So what was it like for the two of you growing up here in Cleveland? Food and family go together, right? What's your memory and what are your thoughts about how important it was for the two of you growing up here in Cleveland?
Yeah, I think food was oftentimes the centerpiece of our gatherings as a family. And it was something that we each brought our own pieces to the table. I remember, going to your dad's house, for instance, for birthdays or holidays, and everybody who came brought something to the table, some recipe that they had prepared. And it was a way that we all sort of gave of ourselves to each other and felt connected to each other. And your family had recipes that were among my favorites. My mother had recipes that were among my favorites. I remember getting together at the family picnics and looking forward to the cookies that I knew my grandmother would be bringing. So I oftentimes associate very specific memories with specific recipes, but even more so, the person or people behind the recipe and my connection and relationship to them. And so I think that's really something that stands out in my memory in terms of how food was a part of the fabric of who we were as a family, and how I think of and even remember those who are no longer with us.
Those July picnics were awesome. Anthony, how about yourself? Anything just grab you with the Cleveland memories of family or food?
Well, a lot of what Angela just said, and also what Michael was saying, in the sense of, a lot of times, again, with sort of older generations and sort of, having experienced the Great Depression or coming from countries where they experienced poverty, a lot of times, food is an expression of love. Like, and for people who came from circumstances where you maybe were deprived of the opportunity of food to some degree, it becomes even more important. And I remember, growing up, it's like, eat was like, it was like a nonstop mantra. You couldn't eat enough. And again, I think it was because it was just sort of informed by this idea that we're no longer deprived, but also the idea that this is, like Angela was talking about, is an expression of love. And it's the way you give and receive love. And so anyway, overcoming that, appreciating the upside of that, while moving forward, like in the ways that Michael was talking about, understanding what you need, how your body works, what's going to be healthy for you as you get older and age. That's been a lot of like figuring out how to ride that line between what you were sort of conditioned for and what you need.
I said at my very end of my article for this month, I said, my mom loved us so much that's what food was. She made the food with love, and that love then came within all of us as a family as we continue to grow. So to hear all three of you say that, gave me a big smile.
I find that your mom did this, your dad did it, our parents have done it, our grandparents. There's a level of storytelling associated with food. And I always loved that as a child because I loved hearing the stories behind the recipes and how each person sort of made the recipe their own. And then I think what Michael was touching on earlier is really sort of resonating with me personally in terms of how I'm evolving the storytelling of our food within my own family right now. I certainly rely on the recipes that I learned as a child, but I also sort of have to update them based on my own dietary needs that are similar to Michael's. We actually also have autoimmune diseases within our family, lupus and RA among them. And so I have found that there are certain foods that are triggers for me that were very much staples growing up. Gluten is primarily among them. And so I need to update the recipes that I grew up and loved in a way that, it made me sad at first, but then I sort of embraced because I realized like, well, this is what I need and this is what helps me, and it sort of evolves.
Michael, I was going to ask you with respect to, being a chef and having so many relationships with other chefs and all the people that you've engaged with over your career. When you hear, like for our viewers, when they want to splurge, all right, so I want that ice cream, I want that cake, I want something that's going to be something splurge that might take me off track. How do you keep yourself from going way off track?
Julia Child had the greatest quote of all time. Everything in moderation, including moderation. And to me, that really is a good way to go through life and food and everything else. It's like, look, when I went through this process, I realized that sugar and dairy were my triggers. Now, that being said, ice cream and gelato are two of my favorite things in the whole world. So, like, I'm not going to not eat them, but I eat them less often. And I also have the knowledge now that when I do eat them, the next day I'm going to be a little achy or I'm going to be a little sore. Like, so it's kind of like I always say to people, I'm like, you go out with your friends. Like I drink bourbon. So you have a Manhattan or a straight up bourbon. If you have one, you're not going to have a hangover the next day. If you have three, you're going to have a hangover the next day. Sometimes you still have three, but like, what got you there. You don't wake up in the morning and you're like, oh my God, my head's killing me. What's going on? So, I think a lot of it is knowing what your reactions are. And then when you make those choices, just try to get the highest quality ingredient of that thing that you can, because like, look, we've all talked about our families growing up and how they cooked and how they ate and how they, and the reality of it is food was created, grown and raised and everything else a lot better than when we were kids than are now. There wasn't as much pesticides and all that crazy things in food that there is in food now. And so things that we were able to eat as a kid that maybe we have odd reactions to now as adults is mainly probably because of how that food was processed. So if you're aware of what you're eating and how it's processed, you're probably going to be better off. Like, you know, like something like celiac is different. You know, celiac and gluten is, you know, you're in big trouble. But like, I know a lot of people, myself included, and this is one of the things that got me thinking about the book so much, is, you know, gluten used to mess with me a little bit. And then, you know, you go to Italy and you eat pasta every day and you feel fine. Well, it's because their flour is handled properly. So that way it's not affecting our bodies like the flour here is. You know, my son owns a donut shop in Sag Harbor, and he mills his own flour and buys responsible flour. And like, people come in the shop that have gluten intolerance all the time. And he's like, look, if you want to take a donut home and try it, it's on me. You know, I'm not saying this isn't going to affect you or is going to affect you, but, you know, and 95% of the time, he said those people come back and they have a donut.
Splurge in moderation, and splurge knowing what might happen the next morning. And you can
Correct.
do that. So Angela, for both you and Anthony, so I've had the opportunity, pleasure to be on set with you occasionally while you made and filmed some of your movies, and had an opportunity to see the spread of food that is made by your chefs and by those individuals that feed everybody on set, including yourselves, including dietary issues. And so how do Hollywood sets who have all this amount of food make it and serve it in a way that's healthy for those who are there? So what is that process, or what can you share with us so those who are listening and watching can understand how that is? I've seen it, and it looks like it's a mass production.
I would say that, you know, on the sets that we've worked on, the chefs and the craft services crew that we're working with take great pride in the fact that they are taking care of an extended family. Like, that really is how they approach the day to day and the offerings that are made available. And I am really pleased to know that, you know, they take the time to check in with people, to understand what it is that people may need from them, may not be able to tolerate, and they make sure that there's optionality for everybody. And the downside of that optionality is there's so much available that you can, you know, you can go overboard. And of course there's sweets, because some people like, you know, to have a little kick from sugar. So it does sort of fall onto the individual, I think, oftentimes to sort of form their own relationship with how they go through the day when it comes to working on a set and what it is that you're eating. And for me personally, I try first and foremost to take care of my mental health when we're shooting, because your stress levels can skyrocket. And so just making sure that you're keeping those in check. And so I think about food as being the fuel for that. And so I try to make choices throughout the entirety of the shoot. And that's the key, because it's pretty easy to fall off the rails. I think we've had that happen a couple of times. But I try through the entirety of the shoot to stick to a routine that works for me. And then I know every now and then I'll treat myself. But if I'm sticking to the health staples that I need to get through the day and to do my job with clarity and focus, then I know I'm going to be doing the best job that I can do. So, and food is a key factor in that.
One of the unique things about the film business, as far as food goes, is, you know, when you're in production, you're renting a lot of equipment, you're renting a lot of real estate, you're paying for an enormous number of people to be present every day. And so it's very expensive to be in production. So, and it can last anywhere from 2 months to 6 months, or, you know, depending on the scope of the project. So there's a tendency to try to squeeze as much work into as little time as possible. And that makes it more economical. So the days are really long days. So to Angela's point, in terms of like the importance of taking care of people through food while you're on set, because you're eating breakfast there, you're eating lunch there, and some days you're eating dinner there. You know, all 3 meals. You'll have everything you eat in a day is sometimes on that set. So it really does have a big impact on how people function, you know, over a several month period.
Angela, I love that that you tie in the theme of fit to practice by talking about your mental health, and I love that your comment that your food is your fuel for your positive mental health.